Turbo Turkey Puncher 3.
Oh, sorry, didn't see you there. Caught me playing my favorite action, thriller, psychological horror, first-person shooter video game, 500 hours of mind-pumping action. But hey folks, it's Indieguy, and today I wanted to go back to an old video of mine. An oldie, but certainly not a goodie. So today I thought it'd be fun to bring you the black sheep of the Doom franchise, Doom 3. Developed by id Software and published by Activision in 2004, which at this time it was so under the benevolent influence of the Super Spider Mastermind, also known as John Carmack. And let me tell you buckos, this game was revolutionary for its time, bringing innovative tech like dynamic lighting. I wonder why it's so infamous then. To start off, what is the story of this game? Well, you're a marine that got put on duty in the UAC colony of Mars City, where the company had more liberty to conduct a bunch of shady experiments, including teleportation. Now, the main bad guy is Dr. Betruger, that from the start seems very suspicious. And of course he's in cahoots with the demons and summons them to take over the universe or whatever the fuck demons do. And that's pretty much all you get. Is the story any good? No, not really. It's kinda just there, I guess. Was that also just a gross oversimplification? Yeah, a bit, but it still doesn't change the fact that the story is merely serviceable. But does it need to be good though? And the answer is, of course not. This is a Doom game we're talking about here. For more than 20 years, Doom had close to no backstory. And that never stopped it from being a massive success. And to quote the Spider Mastermind himself, story in a game is like a story in a porn movie. It's expected to be there, but it's not that important. You gotta admit, bro's spitting and shitting and coming some straight fucking fire, goddamn! In all seriousness though, the story is nothing to write home about, but what makes it a bit more memorable are the PDAs. Now in this game there are a ton of these things scattered around the levels that contain various pieces of information. We'll put a pen on that though. But in these wonderful pieces of 2000s futuristic technology, there are several audio logs and emails that flesh out the universe a tad bit more. Emails about poker nights, audio logs that detail safety concerns or weird sounds heard, or just advertisements to one of the game's gimmicks. We'll also put a pen on that. The thing with this is that after a while, they'll just start being the same thing, especially for the audio logs. They mostly just go, thing happens, we'll report to supervisor. On the meantime, I start some quite possibly illegal military equipment on Walker X with code Y. I really sure do hope nobody comes and opens it. It isn't too bad, but it does get a bit boring after the 50 billionth time you have to hear an audio log. One might commit the grave mistake of thinking that Doom 3 is an action game, much like the first games in the franchise were. And if you thought that, then where have you been in the last 20 years? Now, this is more of an action horror game, emphasis on horror, which was a wild new direction that the franchise was aiming towards. Even Doom 64 and Doom PSX that lean more towards horror were not this focused on it. Back in 2004, you'd be forgiven for thinking that this would be an ass-kicking action game, all thanks to the trailer. So I imagine it would have been a huge shock to boot up the game and be greeted by this. Not like I know what that feels like. I was shitting in diapers by that point. So, do these spooks work? Surprisingly, they do. The atmosphere at certain parts is very tense, especially when the levels are pitch black and the only source of light is a handheld flashlight that you have to switch out to instead of having your gun in hand. And this is where half of the reasons why this game is so divisive come from among the fans. So much so that for the BFG Edition that celebrated Doom's 20-year anniversary, it was replaced with a shoulder-mounted flashlight. Personally, I think that the flashlight is a decent addition to the game, and even if you don't like it, I don't think that removing it in favor of the one from BFG Edition is really the way to go without redesigning the game completely. What do I mean by this? Well, certain sections are meant to be played with the handheld flashlight. If you remove it from the equation, then certain parts lose most of the tension they had. And also, you can see very easily the wires that are pulling the game to make it scarier. Well, you can see him better. Before a game set in claustrophobic halls of a Mars base, you'd think that the environments would be all copied and pasted, but this isn't really the case. While it is true that there isn't a wide variety of locations, I still think this creates room for memorable levels, and they do exist. But holy shit, hell looks fucking awesome. I really like this new approach that the designers went for when making this game. It's grotesque. Body parts are used as decor. Lava is more than common, and some halls are mockeries of earthly architecture of old. In other words, this is metal as fuck. This is easily one of my favorite renditions of hell in a video game. But getting back on the topic of spooks, do they work 100% of the time still? No, it's probably closer to 50. The problem is, as you progress in the game, the jump scares and the enemy spawns become super predictable. You just don't get scared after a while. You'll just train yourself to react to the spawn sound. It just feels repetitive after halfway through, which I think is this game's Achilles heel. Also, I feel like this game loses its focus on being a horror game and goes more for an action route. It isn't particularly a bad thing, mind you. Doom 3 works fine as a more action-focused game, and it almost erases the problem with the jump scares, shifting your focus more towards a new fight instead of a new scare, which is a nice way to switch it up a bit. We talked about the spooks, but what about the shoots? Well, you'd be surprised to know that it's passable. Now, this is a far cry from the first Doom games. The originals had you kill tens of demons at a time, but in here, things are a bit different. At most, you'll be facing maybe 5, 6 enemies at once, sometimes a bit more if you're in the end game or if it's smaller enemies. But even with this, I still think that many of the weapons feel good. The classic weapons do come back in style though. Most of the weapons feel great and have their own purpose. Even the pistol is good for dispatching the regular zombies and for long range shots. All the weapons are very useful and heavy and feel nice. But yeah, I know why you're still here. You're waiting for the shotgun's verdict. You're either waiting for me to jerk you off by pulling an old switcheroo and saying that it's great, or by utterly shitting on it. But well, which one is it? What if I tell you that both opinions are correct? For those that don't know, the shotgun in Doom 3 might be the most divisive thing in the franchise. Because of its efficiency, or rather lack thereof, it will be a very common occurrence to kill the lowest tier enemies with 2 or more shots in very close quarters. But in all fairness, it is also somewhat common to kill tougher enemies with a single shot as well. And this is all thanks to the massive spread the gun has. This is just annoying. It makes a considerably powerful weapon look awful. Most of the times I just found myself using other weapons to do the job that would fall to the shotgun in the original. It just does not seem to be able to keep up, even though it deals a ton of potential damage. However, I do get what they were trying to do here, and it does work. Mostly on paper. The idea here is to make the game tenser, for the combat to be more up close and personal, to heighten the mortality of the combat. But the problem here is simple. There are other more efficient weapons. I can just switch to a more reliable weapon that I know will probably not leave me exposed. I don't know, man, this is more of an oversight than anything in my opinion. But to add to the old arsenal, there are also some new weapons, like the flashlight that you can use as a melee weapon, dealing double the damage as fists do. It still isn't much though. There's also the machine gun that is a very useful weapon, having a very low spread and dealing a reasonable amount of damage, which makes it great for sniping. There's also the grenades that are a bit lackluster. They deal a nice amount of damage, but I hardly ever use them. They're just weird to use, I guess. Last but definitely not least, there's the Soul Cube, which is the last weapon you'll get and is essential for the late game. It basically homes into the enemy that has the biggest health pool and it insta-kills, leeching their health. You do have to charge it by killing enemies though, which is a good trade-off. And even though some of these additions are a bit redundant, I still think they add a lot to the gameplay. They give you more combat options that, for the most part, suit this new 3D environment pretty well. Okay, we finally have the boomsticks All we need now is something to shoot at. And lucky for you that this game has a somewhat large variety of demons for you to pulverize. And since that's the case, I'm gonna be putting them all in a tier list. Yeah, I know, very original. Now, there are some new enemies added to Doom 3, like the commandos, the cherubs, the rafts, the maggots, and the ticks and trites. So let's start with them. The ticks and trites are basically the same spider enemy. I guess you're fucked if you have arachnophobia. The only thing different between them is that the ticks are a bit smaller and deal less damage than the trites. But there's literally no way you'd know that, cause again, they are the same enemy. E tier. I still like some of their encounters and they are used sparingly. Their designs are also pretty cool. Next up are the maggots that are these squishy melee enemies. They are a step above the zombies, but not as dangerous as the imps. Still a nice addition. I also love their designs, so B tier. These guys deserve more love. Now, the wraiths are pretty original. They are melee enemies, but they move around by teleporting, making them hard to kill from a distance, forcing you to play by their rules. Only you can still hit them mid-teleport. Still, B tier. I like them. The cherubs are... Holy shit. They're another small enemy type that swarms you. Their design is haunting, but their encounters are most of the times annoying. Mostly because their lunge attack and their impressive health pool, which is the only thing keeping them from an S tier, so hey. Lastly are the commandos, which I love. These are tougher enemies that come in two varieties. There's the tentacle guys, which might seem tough, but you can just crouch under their attacks. Then there's the dudes with the chain gun that, thank god, aren't as bad as the ones in Doom 2. In terms of design, I do think they aren't really on par with the rest, but they're still fun to fight against, so B tier. That's it for new ones, now on to the oldies, which I think translated pretty well into full 3D. First off, we have the zombies, both the civilian and armed ones. Some of the civilian zombies have neat designs, but they're your basic enemy, and basic enemy with guns, so D tier. Then you have the imps that you'll be fighting for 90% of the game, so if you don't like them, too bad. As for me, I think they're kind of bland. I don't think there's anything wrong with how they are or look, but it's easy to get bored of them, so fucking C tier. The cacodemons are next, and they look, weird. Look, translating into 3D, a big flying meatball with a huge asshole is hard, okay? He's special, he's my special little boy, and for that he deserves a C tier. Look, I like his encounters, but he looks a little bit too goofy. And then we have the pinky demons, and let me tell you, someone must have hated these guys. They barely get any appearances in the game. I like their encounters though. They are big, tanky sacks of meat that rush at you and deal a considerable amount of damage. In the cramped halls of the Mars base, that is panic inducing, and because of that, C tier. They also look kinda goofy. Another enemy that must have been hated are the Lost Souls. Okay, this time with a good reason though. They barely show up and are as annoying as they were in the original. They're just another small enemy, but now it flies. Their design's also kind of meh. I don't like it too much. E tier. The old Skelly boys are next. The Revenant. Their moveset is well translated here, having both the homing and normal projectiles. I really like their encounters, and even though they look silly, I like their design. A tier. You can't go wrong with these guys. The Mancubus is next, and oh boy, he's a big boy. He doesn't do much besides shooting his cannon, and his design is kinda eh. He looks like your typical Reddit mod, so C tier. Up next are the Archviles that aren't as much of a pain in the ass this time around. They don't resurrect monsters anymore like they did back in Doom 2, but they can spawn them now. A good change, honestly. The enemy they spawn seems to be tied to the encounter, but I don't know. Honestly, A tier. Their design might be a bit boring, but their encounters are generally fun. Lastly, we have the Hell Knights that get a pretty cool intro that makes a reference to Doom 1 Z1M8. They are tanky and deal a lot of damage, and their design, although a bit simple, is cool at the same time. A tier. That's all of them. Here's the full thing. Feel free to go in the comments and tell me I'm wrong because the cherub should be an F tier. So as you might have guessed, the designs are a bit of a hit or miss, and I get if someone doesn't like them. I myself do. I think they fit what Doom 3 was aiming towards, and I respect that. And this is why I think these demons serve the gameplay pretty well. None of them are too annoying or cheap, and even the ones that are used somewhat sparingly when compared to the imps. Yeah, my biggest critique on this regard is that there are way too many imps in this game. Doom 3 seems over-reliant in low-tier demons for a great deal of the game, which makes encounters with demons like the Revenants or the Archviles more meaningful. But then, what is affected is the rest of the game and its pace. A big part of Doom is what the game hides. In the original games, a lot of the times you'd be searching the levels for secrets, to either get better weapons or to get more health and ammo, or just to see the little numbers go up in the end. Some levels are iconic for their secrets, and even though they are at times a bit obtuse, they are a great part of Doom. So how are they here? Has the torch been carried on? Sort of. Doom 3 does this in a different way though. In the originals, a lot of the times finding secrets meant either going around humping all the walls or exploring hazardous areas. In this game, however, things are a lot simpler. Remember those PDAs that I said had little pieces of lore? Well, those things sometimes have codes to open lockers that contain supplies. If it isn't on an audio log, it's most likely on an email. And if it isn't on any PDA, then look around you. Now, I kinda don't like this. It is something different, I do have to commend that, but it does get samey, leading us back to the problem with the audio logs and emails getting repetitive. Thankfully though, the lockers are not the only secret. There are also some more traditionally styled ones. This comes in the form of either hidden supplies and tucked away paths, or even little screens that you can interact with. These are really satisfying to find, especially the ones with the little screens. I don't know what it is, but it gives me a dopamine rush. It makes my brain feel funny. I feel like I want to gamble. As you might remember, we still have one more pin to look at. You remember that little gimmick we talked about? Well, it has to do with lockers. More specifically, Martian Buddy lockers. Now, you'll see Martian Buddy advertised in some emails, and what it was a sort of ARG, an augmented reality game. Now, the term has been thrown about recently when people want to mention internet horror stories, but what an ARG is basically mixing various storytelling means in a hidden way to deepen story beats. How does it work here? Well, in some email inboxes you'll get spam that gives you a link that will take you to martianbuddy.com. Sadly, this link doesn't work anymore, taking you to a random Doom article. So I guess we have to use the Wayback Machine. Yeah, it's just a simple website with the code on the bottom. There you have it, I just gave you the code for two lockers. Not like this isn't in any of those early 2010 locker code videos. Oh no, this is a very good idea with a very bad execution. But does this influence gameplay? Or even diminish your enjoyment of it? Or even was necessary to begin with? Well, no, but it is something very interesting that games nowadays don't do all too often. The effort was still appreciated. It's an A for effort. Now, we've talked about this a little bit, but what do I think about the BFG Edition? Well, there are some good things about it. The graphics are a lot smoother, they actually put in checkpoints, and you can set the aspect ratio to 1080 without having to go into the console, not breaking the game in the process. There is a clear love and passion for the game by the developers, not just because of this, but also because they give you Doom 1 and 2, and a brand new kick-ass expansion for Doom 2 called No Rest for the Living. Oh, and they also fixed their war crime. For Doom 3, you also got the Resurrection of Evil expansion pack and the new campaign called Lost Mission, which was cut content from the base game. And it fucking sucks. This love was also translated into listening to criticism, and this is in the form of removing the flashlight, and we all know how I feel about that one, don't we? But they listened to this piece of criticism like if it was unanimous. They could have just put an option to have it or not. Then it would appease both the people that like this new flashlight and the ones that don't. It's simple. Well, I'm saying this, but I couldn't do jack shit of what I just said, and I don't even know if it's possible or not. But to put it clearly, I think that the BFG Edition is fine in certain regards, but this misses what Doom 3 actually is. If you want a more laid-back experience, go for it, but if you want to experience the game the way it was meant to be played, go for the original. I love Doom as a franchise. The originals are my favorite games of all time, which I think is a pretty well kept secret of mine. I also love Doom 3. However, I can understand that this is most fans' least favorite mainline game and franchise. It's just so much different from everything else that Doom is that I imagine that it is a shock for most people. A shock that attracted me to the game. With this, I'm not trying to say that you're wrong if you don't like this game or that you just don't understand its genius. People like and dislike different things, and that's alright. You do you. As long as it's within the law. As a final verdict, I give the original Doom 3 an 8 out of 10 and the BFG Edition a 6 out of 10. I think this game isn't as bad as some people make it out to be. It actually can be a ton of fun. And yeah, something as little as a flashlight being different affects the score this much. Yeah, I'm sick of talking about flashlights. That's about it. See ya.
I promise you I'll always be right here. I'm right next to you.